from KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. On air and online, this is Intersection.
Hello and welcome to Intersection, where people and ideas meet online and on KBIA. I'm Ryan Famuliner. For nearly a decade, Chancellor Brady Deaton and Provost Foster have held the top posts at the University of Missouri flagship campus in Columbia. Now the university is beginning a significant period of change at the administration level. Chancellor Deaton will retire on November 15th, and Provost Foster will retire at the end of the year, as will the Vice Chancellor of Administrative Services and the Vice Chancellor of Research. Deaton and Foster have overseen a significant period of growth and change for the university. Today on Intersection, we're hosting an exit interview of sorts for these university leaders to talk about the successes and struggles of their time at MU and to hear what advice they have for their successors. Joining us in studio today, MU Chancellor Brady Deaton has served in that role since 2004 and worked at the university since 1989. Chancellor Deaton, welcome to the show.
Ryan, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. And MU Provost Foster, who came to the university as provost in 2005. Provost Foster, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. And we won't be able to take questions from the audience as we usually do today because we were not able to schedule this conversation during a time that the show could be broadcast live. So to start, Chancellor Deaton, I thought it might be good to just start here because this has been kind of the ongoing conversation for years now, right? Is the amount of funding that this is available to the university, especially state appropriations, has seen a decline over recent years, or has been a struggle anyway to get those numbers up. But at the same time, we've seen all this growth, the university enrollment especially. How has that balance been struck? What have been the challenges there, and what's worked?
I think what you're seeing here is what's going on at many public universities across the nation, and that is a redefinition of the entire business model for perpetuating the growth and quality of the university. So as we have seen the economy shrink at times and state revenues drop off and reductions even in the budget of the university from the state, we've modified then, and there's been pressure for increasing the tuition rate to help offset that, to depend on growth in research and the funds from the auxiliaries that are doing well that can help offset some of the losses of funds. So there's been really an entire restructuring. At the same time, part of that is the private giving from donors and supporters of the university that has occurred, so that we completed, for example, during this period, $1 billion private fundraising campaign. And all that is what contributes to the overall financial model of the university. And we try to balance all those. We're concerned about keeping the tuition low because we want to provide access to students of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and that's a challenge in today's time. Mm-hmm. And we've also expanded as part of that to help students our part-time work opportunities on campus. Tried to look at it comprehensively, both from the revenue side and what it's costing students and who are on the campus in net to come here.
Sure. I remember actually being at a faculty meeting a few years ago, actually, and this conversation came up as it often does in these conversations, right? And I remember you being part of the conversation about how the university on the funding side may have to look more like a private university in the future, as far as those, especially those donor funds.
No,
right?
And that's definitely occurred because we've had significant growth in the private funding of the university, modest growth in tuition, actually relatively low from a national perspective. We've kept that quite low. But as state funds have declined from, say, for our campus to over 20%, I think when I began working here as provost and chancellor, to now, in terms of total funding, probably less than 10% of our budget comes from the state. But more than that, it's more like 20% of the operating budget. So one has to be careful about how you look at the denominator in these equations.
Mm-hmm. And what are opportunities also on the other side of things for cuts, I guess, and what has been done, and what are there opportunities on that side of spending changes, since obviously the funding is a challenge?
It's not just a matter of cuts. It's a matter of restructuring in significant ways. I mean, we talk about the business model changing, but one of the ways it's changing is that we're going to deliver instruction in very different ways in the future than we do now. There have been technological changes, for instance, that are going to change the way we we pass information, knowledge on to students. That'll probably be done not by lectures anymore, but more by technologies that actually are very effective in tracking students' understanding of the information as the information's delivered. So there'll be changes of that sort, and it's a little hard. No, it's not a little hard. It's impossible. It's impossible to predict how, say, 10, 15 years down the line, all of this is going to affect the business model. But I think my point is just that it's not just that revenue streams are changing, and costs are changing in the sense of, things that we want to cut, something like that. But the whole model for how we deliver instruction, what kind of research we do, all of those things are changing, and so it's much more complex than just the trajectory of the state appropriations.
And let me just add to what Brian is saying, because he's right on target. Particularly when you have growing record enrollment at the university year after year, it's a little difficult to even realistically talk about any kind of cutting, because you're in fact trying to provide the educational the instruction that's needed. So electronically, we've been able to expand the classroom, so to speak, in a major way. And in fact, internally, in terms of structure, probably the consolidation of courses has been one of the significant steps that we have taken. For example, instead of having statistics taught in 10 departments, where they're often very applied and needed, you consolidate that into a very powerful statistics department, which we've done, and have one that is really of great national prominence today. So that's part of the overall model as well, as you look at these kind of adjustments. We've also expanded, of course, because of the tremendous demand by students for the quality of instruction that the J School provides, and that's provided really across the entire campus. We've had growth in out-of-state enrollment, international student increases. All that adds additional revenue as well. That gives us the flexibility then to really address sort of the emerging needs of a quality curriculum.
Sure, and maybe let's...
An important kind of an ironic good side to all of this is that MU is a very fiscally disciplined place, much more than many other universities. And like I say, in kind of an ironic way, we were able to go through the economic bust better than many other institutions, because we were already very disciplined in the way we organize our fiscal affairs. Just to add one thing, Brady mentioned having achieved efficiencies in delivery of courses by bringing certain things together, like the statistics courses. We've done the same thing on the research side with what we call core facilities, where rather than having a certain kind of instrumentation, for instance, sprinkled around in 6 different departments, it comes together in a much more effective way in a centralized core facility that reports through the research office. So there's been this kind of reorganization that cuts across a lot of different things, not just instruction.
So what does that mean, I guess, on the ground level for the researchers in different departments? They are working with this like central agency, I guess, and when
a central core facility, but it's a much more up-to-date, higher quality staff support and higher quality instrumentation, that sort of thing.
And it really is a reflection of tremendous commitment by the faculty, the deans, in the departments to work together as well, and it helps promote the interdisciplinary culture that's been really a hallmark of what Provost Foster has added to here in major ways at the university. So the core facilities really are they're the wave of the future, and researchers tend to like that approach better, because we can maintain the quality, the control, and the advancement in investments more effectively.
Has that also been important as enrollment has grown, and maybe because that research aspect, it's kind of a balancing act, right? Where you've got all these different missions of the university, and you've got to keep up with one thing, got to still do the other aspects as well. Is that one of the methods you use to try to keep up with the level of research you'd like to have at the university? I mean, what are the challenges there as the priorities have to be balanced?
Yeah. Yes, it definitely does help keep up. In fact, it enables us often with relatively less investment than another university in a sister state to move ahead with more advanced techniques. So it's one of the strategies, and an important one. But
you're right. I mean, there are only 24 hours in the day.
Right.
And people have many different things to do, and they have to balance the teaching and the research and the public service and the clinical work, and all of those things have to be balanced. And in the end, the key question is how do you achieve critical mass in order to have high impact work going on? And one of the ways we do that Brady just referred to is we bring people together in interdisciplinary kinds of research, where we bring people from various units around campus together. And that does several things. One thing is it does bring us to critical mass, but it also brings together people with different perspectives and different knowledge bases and methodologies and things like that in ways that produce really high impact, innovative research.
Sure. And sorry, go ahead.
I could add an interesting example, I think, by just talking about our extension mission, because if you go back to the founding of the land-grant universities with the 1862 Morrill Act that created the land-grant universities, and 1914 with the Smith-Lever Act that created the extension division, you already had extension occurring quite a bit, because as this research burgeons in a university, the public demand for it is great, and you've got to reach out. So then it was formalized in legislation. So we're celebrating next year a 100-year anniversary of extension. I spoke yesterday to the statewide extension conference, for example, as several hundred people. And there you see that challenge writ large, because you've got our top researchers, say in nutrition, which feeds our program in food and nutrition to low-income families. And so as the new knowledge comes along, it's critical that that extension field staff be linked into that knowledge base. And I could say the same thing for new technologies in agriculture and marketing and in business development, which we have a very vibrant program, or youth development programs. So having that synergy come together is really a hallmark of a land-grant university. It's something I think distinguishes us from many other, even public universities. We are committed to that integration. So the concept of integrating across even the submissions, teaching, research, extension, international work, economic development, feeds in the ability to carry it off when it gets down to looking at infrastructure for research. There's a natural flow and logic and culture there that we can build on.
Another huge area for that sort of integration is, of course, delivery of medical services,
right,
like in the clinics and the hospital and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, one thing you talk a lot about when you talk about research is the AAU accreditation of the university as well. And so I wonder how important this critical mass is in that aspect. And I guess what would you tell your successor as far as why that is so important and what the university is going to have to do to keep that level of research happening?
Well, and let's just be clear. It is really not an accreditation by the AAU. Okay, the AAU is really a membership organization, and so in the academic world, that is an important distinction. And it happens to be an association that selects its own members or dismisses its own members, which is very rare. But we are one of the 34 public members of a total of 62 universities, I believe it is today. Two of which are in Canada, actually. McGill and the University of Toronto. And we're looking, the AAU is always looking internationally at the coalitions of universities in other countries. And the question arises, well, should we not have a member maybe from Mexico at some point, because we got two from Canada? That issue is before us, and the membership in the AAU, we feel, is very important, because it really brings you to the table when an important national public policy dialogue in a unique way. And it's for that reason, and that it is, in a sense, there is certain status associated with it. And so the markers of membership become important for us, and we're using that very importantly in enabling us to steer toward excellence in research, in National Academy of Science members that are here working with us and encouraging our faculty to develop effective research that's cited by their peers effectively. So and these are all markers of AAU membership that are very important. And then awards that can be achieved, such as National Academy status and other important awards, Pulitzers, Nobel Prizes. So these have sort of become the pinnacle of measurement of high quality. And we recognize that many parts of our land-grant mission may go beyond those measures. And in no way do we want those measures to discourage the core mission we have to the public and to the state of Missouri. So that's, again, part of the balancing act that's rather unique when you have a land-grant university as a member of a prestigious group like the AAU. So I believe there are 16 land-grant universities as part of that 34, 16 or 17 of the 34 public research universities.
I do want to take a moment to remind our audience that this is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Ryan Famuliner, and today we're joined in studio by MU Chancellor Brady Deaton and MU Provost Brian Foster. Both are retiring from their positions this year, Deaton later this month and Foster at the end of the year. We're having an exit interview of sorts to talk about the successes and struggles as they led the university over the last decade and talk about the future of the university. We won't be able to take questions from the audience as we usually do today because we were not able to schedule this conversation during a time that the show could be broadcast live, but we'd like to remind you that you can usually watch Intersection as streaming video online during our live conversations every Monday afternoon at 2 at kbia.org. You can watch that video and join our online chat by going to kbia.org and scrolling down to the link for Intersection. Again, that's Mondays at 2 online at kbia.org. I almost jumped to this earlier, but that was a great conversation. I'm glad we went there. But Chancellor Deaton, you brought up out-of-state students and international students, and that's one area there has been a lot of growth since you took over in 2004 and Brian Foster coming in 2005. Again, you guys have overseen a lot of this growth, particularly international students, right? And one number was when we looked through the numbers, specifically the amount of Chinese students. We had around 300 in 2004 and just over 1,200 this year, which is a big chunk for the university. So talk a little bit about how important those international students are, and particularly, I guess, Chinese students. That's been a topic of discussion nationally as well, I suppose.
It's a very important dimension because of the way in which we are interconnected as a globe, and that the job market that most of our students are going out into is so significantly affected by international affairs. So the most effective way, or one of the most effective ways that I think Provost Foster and I both feel is very important is in bringing students to our campus so that interculturally students learn to interact with other cultures. And then we've also promoted students studying abroad. And let me just say as background here, Provost Foster and I cover, because I was provost for 6 years before he arrived, we cover almost 15 years, the last 15 years of academic leadership on the campus, with Provost Foster being the academic leader certainly for the last 8 years, and has done a fabulous job, let me say. I'll give him tremendous credit in what he's done with the Mizzou Advantage in promoting interdisciplinary work. And out of that all comes more attention and interest on the part of international students. Now, if you look at the world today with two nations, well over 1 billion population, China and India, and countries that are growing in income, and that's very important in this context. There's a tremendous demand for advances in higher education because those countries have learned the lesson well that the United States particularly taught, Europe, I'd say to a lesser extent, that education is vital to the future social and economic development of the country. So we've believed in that. We've used higher education to promote economic development, to promote a workforce that's viable and can move into the future in an innovative way. Those other nations of the world now desperately want that, and they're developing their own universities, and we could talk a lot about this, but they're developing their own universities in major ways at an incredibly rapid pace that I think we've never seen in the United States. At the same time, the populations are so large, and China's had over a double-digit growth in income per capita for the last decade plus. When you think about that, that's a powerful demand not only for education and food, product that Missouri also and the nation is very important to us. So therefore, we're getting growth in Chinese students, and Indian students also, but Chinese particularly, as are most public universities and private ones. But the publics have grown, I think, a bit more in that regard.
What about the financial benefit for the university of these international students?
It certainly brings a financial benefit directly because of the tuition paid either by their families or by their governments or sponsoring organizations, which is very significant. And then very importantly also, it's a major source of new knowledge and research strength on our own campus. They bring tremendous skills and insight. And so the flow of benefit is definitely two ways in that regard.
Is that still part of that equation we talked about at the beginning of the show, though, of new funding models? And is that something that has to be considered given the demand you're talking about?
I think that's fair to say.
I think that's fair to say, but it's not a huge piece, I think, of the fiscal area. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning in this respect, we're in a world that's globally connected, and it's not just that we're getting international students. We've got international faculty as well, and staff and postdocs and others. So it's a global campus now, and that's a very important
Yeah.
It's a very important element of a great university these days. We have to be preparing people, our students and faculty and others, to be functional in a global environment.
And the number of our own students who are obtaining some of their education abroad is a significant number also. So
Very much so.
And they're in Brussels studying. I know the School of Journalism has particularly been very active with their program in Brussels, and University of Ghent partnership. We have the University of Western Cape in South Africa, and other European and Asian universities. These are important dimensions. The future of education will be significantly more global if we're successful in keeping peace in the world and continuing to grow economically.
Another slice of this too are those out-of-state students we mentioned as well. I know that was one thing that came up in the conversation about the shift to the SEC as well, right? Is that
Right.
our possible recruitment areas may shift, right?
Right.
So what are your feelings now on what's happened since you've been here, and also what the prospects are for the future as far as out-of-state recruitment for the university?
I can quickly summarize, and Provost Foster may want to add something to that.
Sure.
But we've had a continued thrust, basically, in recruitment from Chicago, which is and Texas, the Dallas area. Those have expanded somewhat into Houston, more prominently Denver, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I think the numbers from California are growing. And then as we shifted into the SEC, just because of brand recognition, the fact that we're highly thought of as an academic institution in the SEC, we felt that we would definitely be expanding the attraction in Atlanta and Memphis, Louisville, other cities in the southeastern region of the United States.
Yeah, I
Provost
think
Foster.
that's. There's another dimension of diversity, incidentally. It's not just a fiscal matter. It's getting people from different regions of the country is a very important piece of the diversity of the campus. So I think this is a big asset that way as well.
Okay. And what are again that region, I guess, with Southeastern Conference, again, literally the southeast part of the country. But are there any other? You mentioned all the cities that we've been drawing from. Any other target cities or areas that we think
we've expanded our presence in Minneapolis and Denver, especially, and now for the first time we have a recruiter in the southeast, and we're just sort of getting, into the southeast recruitment mode. From what I heard from some of the people in enrollment management, though, the future looked pretty good. Somebody had said that they had heard when they were in Atlanta recently, there was quite a buzz at the high schools about Mizzou. So, that's good news.
And if you think about it, and just to add what Provost Foster is saying, there's a buzz about Missouri in the SEC because we've done well athletically also, and our APR for our student athletes. Our football team was the tops in the SEC in APR last year, and I think overall, all sports, we were second only to Vanderbilt, a private institution, the only private member of the SEC, in fact. This competition for students is going to increase, and we have stepped up our recruiting efforts only very modestly, and we've been able to do that because of the brand is growing probably faster than the investment in the recruiting right now. But many other states are just putting significantly more resources into active recruiting to try to combat this in a sense, or make sure they're getting as many students from Missouri as we're getting from them. Yeah. So that's become quite a competitive situation, and so. Which means you've got to fall back and make sure that your university is progressing with its brand and its quality and some unique dimensions of life in the university campus.
One of the things that probably ought to be made explicit is that some of the enrollment challenges we're facing has to do with demographics. Mm-hmm. There are just fewer high school students graduating, and that's because of the echo of the baby boom. It's nothing more than that, and that's been hit Missouri 3-4 years ago.
Right.
Now it's starting to hit Illinois, where we've done a lot of recruiting. But one of the things about the Southeast is that that's not the case there. They don't have that kind of demographic. So
interesting.
That's a good point.
Okay. There's a lot we want to get to, so I'm going to jump ahead to another topic that we'd like to talk about. MOOCs, these online courses that many times are offered for free, sometimes not actually as part of a coursework that you're going to get a degree, but they're higher education level courses that even Ivy League schools are offering online. What do you see that as? Is that a threat to the university? Is that an opportunity? What do you think about that aspect of the future? Because that's something that's coming. You guys may not have to deal with hands-on, but your successors likely will.
Well, I said earlier that the modes of delivery are changing. I don't think the MOOCs in their current form are likely to be a huge influence as they're delivered. And but we're going to see the ways we evaluate learning change. We're going to see, as I said earlier, we're going to see changes in the way we deliver information to students. And I think the technologies behind the MOOCs are going to be powerful.
Right.
But I think the current way they're delivered and certified and all that is going to change. But yeah, it's a very important development.
I think we see it principally as an opportunity for a university like Missouri, because it does provide additional online material that that students have access to. So if I were teaching economics, and I have a son who actually does teach it in Canada, and he uses MOOCs very actively in his courses. He'll say, be sure you capture this course, and that speech by so-and-so. So it's a very important source of additional information that can be channeled into the learning process. So we encourage our faculty, as Brian is rightly saying, it's the technology behind it that's really changing everything. It's changing even the way we do things on campus, the way we reach out, because we have a very active e-learning program ourselves. So it's a matter of taking advantage of all that technology and new knowledge, and it does change it, and we've got to be nimble as we take these steps.
I think a lot of people, maybe even most people, would argue that the norm of the future will be what they call the flipped classroom, which means that the lecture probably will go away, or for the most part, as the way of delivering instruction, and that the information will be transferred technologically. But the classrooms then will become more interactive and team learning and hands-on learning of various kinds. That really is a fundamental change in the way we deliver instruction. But I think there's a lot of agreement that the flipped classroom is the future.
Sure, and I know a little bit of this because I work on the campus, but for those that don't, what are some of this is already happening here, correct?
Absolutely.
And there's the Blackboard program and other, what are some examples of things that are happening now already at the university?
Well, the journalism school is a good example. Hands-on learning, active learning is key to the Missouri method. The same's true in the medical school. Same's true in nursing and education. Students spend lots of time in schools teaching, and it's true for service learning of various kinds. We do hundreds of thousands of hours of community service with our students doing learning in that mode. So it's infused over the whole campus.
Yeah, and the simplest way is that you can do so many things asynchronously now. In other words, you can do them now and have it delivered tomorrow. So the delivery of knowledge is just is multifaceted, and that can be set up and designed in different ways, combined with all that we obtain from social media in new ways. Things can be analyzed differently. You can almost instantaneously tap public opinion globally, and the international dimension of the internet is such a powerful thing. When I was lecturing, 40 years ago in the classroom, I'd pick up the phone sometimes. We'd have an expert in my field, and I'd pick up the phone and call them at Harvard or Wisconsin, and I'd say, could you speak to my class for 15, 20 minutes? And most faculty were glad to do that. And so you have a great interactive by telephone. And that now is just a weak example of what you can do in so many ways. But wherever the knowledge is in the world, you can have it at your fingertips in the classroom. Yeah. And that's the challenge to all of us, I think. And then the next generation that comes along will be able to do it a lot better.
Sure. We're going to have to take a quick break. I'm going to remind our audience this is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. Today we're joined in studio by MU Chancellor Brady Deaton and MU Provost Brian Foster. Both are retiring from their positions, Deaton later this month and Foster at the end of the year. We're talking about the successes and struggles as they led the university over the last decade and talking about the future of the university. I'm Ryan Famuliner. We'll be right back after a short break.